Do you want to learn how to turn this into this? Let's check it out. Hey, what's going on YouTube? Now, like I said in the intro, we are going to turn this empty canvas into this masterpiece by only using the rectangular tool. Whoa! So let's start by creating a square by holding shift. Now let's give it a color. Well, actually, you know what? Let's give it a gradient. Now I already have all the gradients ready, but I'll show you all the colors I've used for it. So this color is for that, and this one is for this one. Okay, so now let's change the angle up a bit. Now I have a thing in mind that the light source is coming from this side, so I'll try to adjust the gradient accordingly. Now let's move our square a little bit. I think that looks good. Now let's duplicate our square by hitting Ctrl plus J or Command plus J on Mac, and let's reposition this new square. I think that looks good for now, and let's bring our duplicate down to the original layer like so. Now comes the hard part. Go ahead and choose the selection tool by hitting A on the keyboard, and let's drag one corner by holding Ctrl and click, and then drag each corner like so. Now I'm gonna fast forward this step. Okay, so now let's change the gradient, and let me show you the colors I've used. Let's change the gradient angle so that it matches the light source. Remember I told you earlier. Now you can play around with the settings a little bit to your desires, but for now, to me, this looks pretty good. Now just hit OK, and now let's create that blue wall. And for that, just duplicate the square that we created in the first place, and simply just drag that down somewhere around here. Looks good, I think. Now I'm gonna change the color for the wall, and I don't know why I forgot to show the colors for this gradient and the next one, so let me just put them right here on the screen. Now let's create a duplicate of that blue wall and get our selection tool, and by holding Ctrl, let's adjust the corners. I'm gonna fast forward this step as well. And now let's change the gradient of this wall. The color for this are right here at the corner. Now once you're happy with the shape of the light blue wall, let's add this padding, or I don't know what's it called, but whatever. Let's create that. But before that, let's add the padding above the dark one, and just simply duplicate the dark blue wall and change its gradient. And let's bring it down to the original layer, readjust the padding, and let me just adjust the color and the angle a bit. And I guess for now it looks okay. We'll come back to this later on. After that, let's add the padding on the blue wall. For that, let's duplicate the wall and readjust it a little bit, and I'll fast forward this as well. Let's change the gradient for the padding like so, and let me adjust this a bit more. Now this looks okay for now. Let's move forward to this weird thing sticking out of this dark blue wall. So for that, let's make a rectangle and give it a gradient, and let me just adjust it a bit. And now let's create a new rectangle and give it a gradient as well. And now I'm going to create a duplicate and shrink it by hitting Ctrl T on the keyboard and selecting the bottom anchor. Now let's add some ground for that. We need another rectangle, and this time I'm going to add a solid color, and thank God I had the color for this already. So just add that, and now put this layer at the back of all the layers. And let's duplicate this layer and shrink it by hitting Ctrl plus T and change the color to purplish. Okay, we are done with the infrastructure, so now it's time for the detailing, which is the good part. And let's add the sky first. Great. So now let's just right click and flip it horizontally, readjust it a bit and bring it all the way back. Perfect. Now you can play around a bit with this image, or you can use your own image. I got this image from Pixels, and I'll put the link down in the description below. And now let's add the shadow for the wall. So for that, just duplicate the layer and readjust it. Bring it back to the original wall and fix this up a bit. Now after that, change its blend mode to multiply and bring the opacity down to 86%. Now at this point I'm going to fix up some things, and you guys can follow along because I'm gonna fast forward it. Okay, things are coming along pretty well, but it looks too smooth, and walls aren't supposed to be too smooth. So let's add a texture to it. For that I have a concrete texture, and to hide the axis just put the cursor in between the two layers and hold alt on keyboard and click in between the layers. This will create a mask. Now just change the opacity. Now I'm going to do the same for all the walls. And now it's time to add the shadow. Simply just create a new layer on top of the wall layer and create a clipping mask, and then select a paintbrush and adjust your brush like so. Now if you think if you have made a mistake, you can fix it by creating an empty mask on your shadow layer and paint over it with a black color. This will erase the mistakes, and you can always delete the mask to revert the changes. You don't have to undo it, so that saves up a lot of time. Now you could add the concrete texture to the upper side of the pillars, but I chose to add noise to it, and just make sure that you have selected Gaussian and monochromatic. Now I'll just adjust some colors and you can follow along with me. Now let's add more shadows by creating a new layer and creating a mask so that it doesn't spreads out and stays inside the wall's boundaries. Now to add some edge shadow, I use a different technique. I created a square and then added a Gaussian blur, and by adding a mask I used the brush to make it a bit dull. Now you can do the same for the other wall, and I'm not gonna show you the whole process because it's going to take a lot of time, but just do it the same way as this wall, and after a little more tweaking you'll get this end result. Pretty neat, right? So I hope you learned a lot from this video. Please do like, share and subscribe, and while you're at it, do press that bell icon down below so that you get notified every time I post a video. Peace.